And so Eliade, Mircea Eliade, who's a great historian of religions, looked at flood stories from all over the world, because there are flood stories from all over the world, partly because there are floods all over the world. But there's a psychological reason too. So you imagine that New Orleans was wiped out by a hurricane, right? A flood. And you say, well, that was an act of God. But then you think, wait a second. They knew those damn dikes weren't going to hold. They knew they weren't built strong enough. They took the money that was allocated to the dikes and spent it badly, and that was willful blindness. And so you could say that it was God who caused the flood, so to speak, metaphorically, but you could also say that it was the degeneration of the state and the willful blindness of the politicians that caused the flood. In Holland, they built the dikes to withstand the worst storm in 10,000 years. In the southern US, they built them to withstand the worst storm in 100 years. And they knew that that was insufficient. And so the flood, if there's a flood, well, you can say, well, that's an act of nature, but you can also say, just wait a sec. Maybe there was a flood because we looked the other way and because our systems were out of date. And that's why in flood stories, there's a continual theme, which is the people get wiped out by the flood because God judges them harshly for their senility and their willful blindness. And it's a story that's very much, you'll have a flood in your life. Right? It'll be a flood of chaos, and you'll find of one form or another, and you'll find when you investigate the causes of the flood that some of it will be, and sometimes this is the case, it's just random. You just got singled out, you got a terrible disease, and that's the end of you, or something like that. But there'll be other situations where the flood comes and you're surrounded by chaos, and you'll look into it and you'll think, I knew this was coming. I knew I wasn't paying attention. I knew I hadn't sorted things out. And the consequences of that will have cascaded and wiped you out. And then you're in real trouble, because not only did you get wiped out, but you also know it's your fault. And that is not a good thing. That makes you bitter and resentful and murderous when that happens. So anyways,